welcome to the Film Yap podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Lloyd, and I'm had the pleasure of being joined by my colleague and fellow Indiana Film Journalists Association member, Ben Sears. How you doing?
Hey Chris, good to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And it's that time of the year where, if they haven't already, critics unveil their top 10 lists for 2024. I think we've both done so, but we thought it would be cool to just kind of, get together, share lists, see where we cross over, see where we diverge, and just, have that really cool, interesting discussion about what's going on.
Yeah, maybe change some hearts and minds and get some people to see some films they hadn't heard of yet or hadn't had a chance to see.
Yeah. And before we get rolling too far, make sure to let everybody know where they can see your work and catch you on social media.
Yeah, most of my writing can be found at my website, which is themoviestate.com. And there are links to all my socials on there, so that's probably just the easiest way to find me. Every once in a while, I'll write for loudandclearreviews.com as well. But yeah, mostly themoviestate.com.
Excellent. Well, why don't we just head right off? And I think we said we were going to start from the bottom up. So why don't we start with? And I said you don't do a strict top 10 list per se. You do a little different.
Well, yeah, I mean it is a top 10, but it's an unranked list, and then I have a movie of the year. So it's a movie of the year, which is the number one, and then basically nine runners up.
Okay. So maybe just go alphabetically from your two through nine, whatever the two through 10, whatever they may be.
Sure, yeah. Well, I guess to get us kicked off, my first one is a documentary called Dahomey. Chris, I don't know if you got a chance to see this one. It kind of got lost in the shuffle of the awards season, but yeah, it's a small little documentary that's available on Mubi from a director named Matty Diop, who had a movie I think in 2019 called Atlantics, which I saw and I definitely saw it. I just can't remember anything about it. But anyway, Dahomey is a really fascinating documentary about this kind of simple subject. It's about in 2021, France decided to give back these artifacts to this country in Africa called Benin. But the reason they did that is because they originally belonged to this African kingdom called Dahomey. And so Maddie Diop found this story and kind of did a little interesting creative spin on it where she kind of imagined what these artifacts are. She kind of gave them an internal monologue. And so there's all these kind of intermittent monologues where it's from the voice of the statues basically, and what they think of the world today, what has changed, what has not changed. But then also in the second half of the film, there's this really kind of fascinating discussion that happens in Africa by a group of students, and they're just kind of talking about what they should be feeling about the return of these artifacts. Whether it should be celebrated or not. What kind of legacy these things have. What should happen to the remaining artifacts that still exist out there in the world. And it's a really kind of fascinating juxtaposition, and it's I don't know if any other filmmaker would have made the same creative choices or made this end result. And really, it kind of came out of nowhere for me because I kind of put it on in the award season crunch, and it was 68 minutes, which was a pretty pretty good selling point for me. And then yeah, just a really pleasant surprise.
Yeah. I will say, we all of us experience this crunch kind of from like mid-November to mid-December where we're just watching ungodly numbers of movies to hopefully we get them as many as covered as possible. And yeah, I know the feeling when you slip one in and it's like, 302 and you're just, oh, Oh,
Yeah.
they're great. I love highlighting films that people maybe have not even heard of and championing it. That's one of the best things
Yeah.
about being a critic.
Yeah, it's if I may say so, it's streaming on Mubi now, so you can find it on there along with The Substance and a lot of other great films from last year.
Cool.
You can also buy and rent it digitally, so check it out.
Outstanding. Well, I did do a traditional top 10 list. So starting at number 10 and moving upward, I had Sing Sing. And this was a film, kind of one of those like loosely based on true story of real prison inmates at the infamous prison who come together to form a theatrical troupe. And Coleman Domingo kind of plays like the head thespian of the group who kind of runs things, then feels a little threatened by this interloper who kind of comes in, and things go from there. And the amazing thing is that other than Coleman Domingo and one or two other professional actors, it's Paul Raci is another one. Is it's pretty much all actual graduates of this prison program playing often themselves or a version of themselves. It's just a terrific piece of ensemble acting. Kind of got a weird release. It came out, it hit theaters here in like July. I saw it, reviewed it, but it just kind of disappeared. People really didn't pay attention to it. Then it kind of came back at some festivals. So another one you may not have heard of, but really worth championing.
Yeah, I like that one as well. I'm always a fan of Coleman Domingo. I think he's great in everything he does. And yeah, the release of that was really weird, especially it originally premiered a year ago at the Toronto Film Festival in like September. So yeah, glad that that's getting some love this time of year as well. I hope that more people are able to see it.
Cool beans. What's next on your list?
Yeah, so another kind of small movie that just really kind of came and went, at least here in Indianapolis, called Evil Does Not Exist, from writer director Ryusuke Hamaguchi. His follow up to Drive My Car from a couple years ago. Very different in terms of scale, in terms of runtime, um, but still just really kind of fascinating small scale story that you can really feel his influence behind the camera. And it's this kind of simple story about a small town in Japan and how they deal with people who want to come around and change the environment and their local economy. And it's a really interesting discussion of nature versus mankind, and just was really taken by the way that Hamaguchi directs that. Almost every frame is dominated by the natural landscape, and it's you can feel that he's really saying something without even really saying it out loud.
Yeah. I like
Yeah,
that one too. I like that one too. I do think like for those who have seen it, the ending is kind of depending on how you want to interpret, either very vague or very off-putting, and kind of took a turn for me that maybe I wasn't ready to go. But yeah, definitely one of the more interesting foreign films I saw
yeah.
here. My number nine was A Complete Unknown, a movie I fully did not expect to have on my list, as I like to say, I'm not a particular fan of Bob Dylan or of Timothy Chalamet, the Hollywood it boy of the moment. Have not been particularly impressed by the depth or the range of performances and roles that he's had. Although I will say, I think it was kind of a horror adjacent film. Was it Bones and All from a year or two
Mm-hmm.
ago? I liked him in that, but he really impressed me, and just a really impressive look at a mix of music and mythology, of kind of not trying to demystify, but just look at this very young man who kind of has over the decades very much cherished this veil of inscrutability about himself. And here it was kind of seeing him in his chrysalis stage of just kind of coming into that stature. And it's just a wonderfully entertaining picture. And even if you're not like a huge Dylan fan, you appreciate the music. A lot of terrific performances. Look at kind of his relationship with a couple of women played by Elle Fanning, and I'm blanking on the actress's name playing Joan Baez. And yeah, just one of those movies. I literally went to the theaters like And I came out just absolutely entranced, entranced, uh, transported away.
Yes. Yeah, I like that movie as well. It was a big pleasant surprise. I am a total Bob Dylan neophyte. I could probably name two or three of his songs at best, and I know even less about his personal life. So I don't know if that really helped or didn't help with my experience with A Complete Unknown. But yeah, it's a real crowd pleaser. I mean, at the very least, the music's good. So yeah, good choice there. I feel like I'll be rewatching that many times down the road. So, very cool. So the next one on my list to keep it rolling along is the Fury Road prequel, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. Big fan of Fury Road, and so I had high expectations for this, and I think it does what Fury Road did very well with all the action sequences. I mean, some of the best action and stunts of the year, for sure. But it also had a really interesting story. George Miller could have just as easily just done the exact same thing that he did in Fury Road, and it would have been fine with me as well. But I think it fills in a lot of interesting details with Furiosa, and then just makes it an interesting story in its own right.
Yeah,
Plus, Chris Hemsworth as the villain, just one of the best, most kind of insane performances of the year, just going full evil and having a lot of fun with it.
yeah, almost literally chewing the scenery. Yeah, Alley 2, huge. I mean, to me, it's clearly a step down from Fury Road, but that's, obviously a very high perch to come from. So very cool follow-up. And I'm just so, interested in that mythology that it seems like George Miller just keeps wanting to build around. I mean, so we're seeing sort of the Furiosa origin story from 20 or 30 years ago, going back to her childhood. I would love to see what happens post Fury Road, what happens with Furiosa now as like the head of this thing. And I've often said I would love to see the origins of Emerton Joe and his two partners, as it were, the Bullet Farmer and the People Eater, when they first arrived in that land decades ago, probably saw themselves as, heroes. So yeah, just honestly, my only wish is that George Miller was younger so he could keep making these movies for the next 30 years.
Yeah, I wish that was the case as well. Unfortunately, because it kind of flopped at the box office, I worry that this will probably be the last.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it did okay. I think it made like $350 million, but considering budgetary, yeah, that's
Right.
that's now considered a flop. Next on my list, number 8 is The Brutalist. And as we're recording this, we're just the little after the Golden Globes Award, kind of the first ish of the Prestige Awards. Although 5 years ago, I thought the Golden Globes were done, but apparently they're okay again now. They've been uncanceled, but whatever. Won the award for best drama. They split it up between musical or comedy and drama. It stars Adrian Brody as a Jewish Polish um, immigrant who comes to America after the World War II and kind of just really struggles to embrace the American dream. He's an architect and ends up having to work at these very low-end jobs. Eventually falls in with a wealthy benefactor played by Guy Pearce, who has this grand vision for this Taj Mahal in the middle of nowhere, and it just goes on there. And it's an audacious, bold film. The writer director, I think, is an actor, and this is, I think, maybe just his second or third picture behind the camera. And it's not a perfect film. I think the last 30 minutes kind of stumbles and bumbles to the end, but it's so audacious in what it's trying to do that I just was transported by seeing it, even if I think it's kind of an imperfect vehicle to its own ends.
Yeah, I mean, I liked The Brutalist. I didn't love it. I wouldn't call it a masterpiece as a lot of other critics have. I think the first half is close to a masterpiece, the second half a little less so. But I mean, at the end of the day, you just kind of have to stand back and just be in awe of that exists. You know, it was less than $10 million and they shot it in like 31 days or something like that. Just
Yeah.
kind of impossible to believe that something like that exists in the way that it does. So can't be mad at that. Yeah.
Yeah. What's next for you?
All right, so we talked about Sing Sing at the Toronto Film Festival last year. So this next one also premiered there. It's called His Three Daughters. It's on Netflix, written and directed by Azazel Jacobs. And I, I mostly just kind of tuned into this one because I had heard good things out of Toronto from last year. And I think it's a really, it's one of the best screenplays of the year, original screenplay. Uh, some of the best performance of the year from Carrie Coon and Natasha Lyonne and Elizabeth Olsen. And just a real kind of magic trick about grief and preparing for someone to die when they're so close to you, and just I really felt like these characters were just real people who had their own unique perspectives, and there was conflict that arose naturally, and which, in a kind of a chamber piece like this doesn't always happen. Uh, Kind of tends to drama tends to kind of come and go, and it feels like the director is, kind of orchestrating it, all of it. But all of this felt natural and real, like, I have not experienced death in this way so closely, but it felt very real and naturalistic to me, as if some of these people actually do exist.
Yeah, very splendidly acted, true ensemble piece, and in that no one character dominates, and very intimate. It has that feeling of a play. Someone wrote a play, but they decided to make it into a movie instead. Wouldn't be surprised if, in fact, someone does do a stage version of it at some point. My number seven was Wicked Part One, and I went into this as kind of I knew a couple of the songs. I knew the basic premise of the play, the recasting the Wizard of Oz, but was really just blown away. Cynthia Erivo performance, particularly as the Wicked Witch, who to be, and just colorful, and the music and the staging, the dance numbers. Interesting enough, it seems like the really hardcore fans of the stage version are the ones who are a little less enamored with it, and maybe folks like me who weren't fans or even that knowledgeable about the stage version are really enjoying it. My only concern is where they split it up. There was about a 160-minute play that they somehow are turning into 260-minute movies. So I'm a little worried they're not going to have enough story material for the second movie, but we'll see.
Yeah. So yeah, Wicked is also on my list, and I think I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum as you. I'm a huge fan of the book. I think it's one of my favorite books of all time. I've seen the stage play, but it's been a while, and I'm not as fresh on that one outside of the songs. So, with my expectations so high, I was kind of, had my hackles up a little bit, and I was pleasantly surprised. I was kind of blown away by how much fun it was. It's almost 2 hours and 45 minutes, and it goes by so quickly, at least to me.
Yeah,
Yeah, the musical numbers are great, the performances are great. Ariana Grande, I think, is a lot of fun. Um, Costumes, production design, choreography. It's all just uh, a great crowd pleaser.
yeah. I listened to some of the original cast recordings on my way home from the screening of this, and I'm going to commit the heresy of saying I think I like the movies versions of this one better. Probably going to make some enemies there. Okay, next on your list, Ben.
All right, so next is Jane Schoenbrun's I Saw the TV Glow from A24. Heard some good things about this out of Sundance, and so I was pretty excited. I had not seen We're All Going to the World's Fair, which Schoenbrunn did a couple years ago. But I think this is a really fascinating story. You could read any number of things into it. It could be a kind of a trans allegory, it could be a coming of age story, it could be about nostalgia, any number of things, and you wouldn't really be wrong. And plus a lot more. Just really like the style of it, like the performances from Justice Smith and Bridget Lundy Payne, who I wasn't really familiar with before this. And then, yeah, the cinematography, I think is some of the best of the year. That kind of neon soaked, kind of 90s aesthetic worked really well for me.
Yeah, we diverge on this one. I think a lot of members of the IFGA really appreciated this one a lot. I was in the other camp. I liked the We're All Going to the World's Fair quite a bit. This one, I really felt like the filmmaker was just chasing weirdness for weirdness' sake, but I don't feel like I need to belabor that point. You can go read my review where I kind of raise my objections to it. Number six for me was Los Freakus. This is probably one most people haven't heard of because I don't think it's gotten any kind of a wide release yet. Hopefully, it will here in the new year. It's a film based on true, set in the 1990s in Cuba, in the communist dictatorship, where young people, kind of the people at the margins of society, the rebels, the outcasts, the losers, the drug users, are in some cases intentionally inflicting themselves with the HIV virus. So they are sent to this sort of like internment community where they basically just sort of get to live their life with, no worries or hassles. And they end up forming this kind of like their own little family there, with obviously some external challenges. And just one of the most human stories I saw this year. Just so empathetic, brings you into this community of people, and you really feel for them, or at least I did. I'm hoping that will get some good play whenever it does come out.
Yeah, nice. I remember that played at the Heartland Film Festival, and I unfortunately I didn't get around to seeing it there. So I'm gonna have to make that a priority. Yeah. So next on my list is another one that kind of came out of nowhere for me. It's called Look Back. It's a animated film from Japan, from a director who I was not familiar with. I think it might actually be their first film. Um, but it's another one that I kind of put on because it's like 58 minutes, less than an hour long. So another selling point there. But it's a really interesting story about two girls who have this love of comics, and they kind of get into this competitive streak with each other, but they also find that their love for being artists kind of unites them. And I really related to it as someone who has always been kind of creatively inclined. So, yeah, was really impressed with it.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. Probably one of my top five animated films of the year and top five foreign language films of the year. Very well done. And again, saying someone I don't have a lot of entree into that world. I'm not a particularly big fan of manga, anime, and it was just such a great story of these two people, these two souls. Number five on my list, repeating my theme this year of movies I did not expect to like so much, is Nosferatu, which I admit even when I heard that this movie was coming out, I literally rolled my eyes like, oh my God, I don't need another vampire franchise. In particular, the Nosferatu, which, the F.W. Murnau silent classic, up to the, Werner Herzog version in the 70s, to even the, I think, 2002-ish Shadow of the Vampire version, where they kind of like twisted the story around. I just like,
Mm.
this is tired material, and I don't need to see another version of it. And man, was I blown away. Edgar's vision is, as I put it, darkly gorgeous and genuinely terrifying. I don't say that lightly, as someone who literally grew up on horror, consuming probably movies I shouldn't have watched at such a young age. It's really, really hard to really scare me, a movie to actually scare me, and this one did.
Nice. Yeah, I'm always down for new Robert Eggers. So I think I need to rewatch that one in the theater because watching it on a little iPad in my bedroom probably is not the ideal viewing experience. So
This is one you have to see on the big screen.
Yeah, I mean, even just for the craft alone, Eggers always has pretty impeccable crafts. So, yeah, definitely gonna make a point to see that on the big screen. So, my next on my list is one that still has not come out here in Indy for some reason. It's called Nickel Boys.
Mm,
I read a decent amount of books this year that got turned into movies, and Nickel Boys was one of them. And so I was really excited for this, even before hearing the buzz out of, I think it was Telluride or Toronto, wherever it premiered. And even reading the book and knowing kind of what would happen beat by beat, I was still really impressed with the way that Ramel Ross chose to tell this story with the first person perspective. I think it brings this story, which is relatively simple about a reform school in Florida during the Jim Crow South, just kind of brings it into a whole new light. I love the cinematography, the score. Ingenue Ellis Taylor gives like one of the best performances of the year. And just, I mean, in all honesty, this is kind of my number two movie of the year. So,
impressive. Yeah, I know another one where I kind of diverge from the consensus. Great looking picture, wonderful performances, based on true story, which I have some familiarity with because I was a journalist in working for newspapers in Florida when a lot of this was kind
mm,
of coming out. But I just felt like the director just it got in the way of the movie, got in the way of the story with a lot of what you call look at me direction. And I just found it distracting. But
okay.
yeah. My number four was Civil War, and that's one I'm sort of worried that it's kind of going to get lost in the awards shuffle just because it came out early in the year, and even though I think it made a big impact on audiences and critics at the time, that it's just too long ago. But just such a a look at a potential civil war in the United States that what makes it so harrowing is it's just so damn plausible. Like, people like to have their tribalist moments, where, everything's great with my tribe. It's everything that's wrong with the other tribe. And some people were exasperated because it didn't, quote unquote, take sides. I think it did, but it was very measured in how it did it. And also a great pay on to the role of journalists. Really the journalists are the center of the story, the chroniclers. So definitely one of the most impactful movies I saw.
Yeah. I was a big fan of that one as well. I think that's just outside of my top 10 for sure. Yeah, I was a fan of it when I first saw it, and then I saw it again after the election, and it hit a little differently. And yeah, I mean, the people that ding that movie because it doesn't pick a side or it doesn't explain, how we got here, I think are kind of missing the point of that movie. But yeah, that's a good choice.
Yes, you can identify the tribalists because their tribe was not honored.
Right. So my next one is Wicked, and we already talked about that. So if you want to give your next one, go ahead.
Yeah, my number three was Conclave. Of course, just wonderful Ray Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, just a fantastic cast. And people have. I guess you could dismiss it as being quote unquote, not a deep movie in that it's been kind of compared to like a political thriller slash crime procedural with the Vatican as the backdrop, but it's just so well done. It's just a wonderful piece of craftsmanship. The great looking, the costumes, the sets, the music. Just it's one of those films. It's just such an exquisite piece of machinery that just never steps a foot wrong.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it. Yeah, I mean, I find anything hard to really gripe about that movie. It's got good characters, good performances, good twists and turns. My parents loved it. They won't stop talking about it. My Catholic parents. I'm mostly interested in it because I'm kind of intrinsically curious about the kind of goofy rituals of the Catholic Church and the real precision with all of this stuff. So that was really cool to me. And then yeah, just everything on top of it. Um, so next on my list is The Wild Robot, the animated film from DreamWorks. I was really not familiar with this until I saw the teaser trailer early on, and I remember when I first saw it, I was like, "Whoa, this could be something special," and I really lived up to expectations. Um, just great animation, really colorful and vibrant. Great music. Lupita Nyong'o, I love her voice performance. Same with Kit Connor and Pedro Pascal. And yeah, just a great story about, what it means to find your purpose. And it's all, it's funny, it's dramatic, it's sad at times. Yeah, I was a big fan.
Yeah, I like that too. Probably also in the top five animated films of the year for me. Um, Again, the comparisons to Wall-E are there, I think, pretty superficially. But it's kind of just about like finding your family or making your own family, um, and terrific vocal performances, and yeah, that's definitely one I like. So I think we're down to my last two and your last one. Is that right?
Yep.
All right, so my number two was Flow, another animated film, another one, small one. It did hit theaters, I think, here just in December. Didn't stay very long. Absolutely wordless story about a cat that gets caught in this massive worldwide flood, which is never explained. It's just everything's now covered with water. It's definitely the human world, but we never see any humans. And it's just this cat that ends up kind of finding its own family as it goes on this journey, and one of those films people have said, is it an allegory? I don't know. It's just an absolutely beautiful, beautiful story, wonderfully told.
Yeah, I really love Flow as well. It's like if I was doing a top 15 list, I would probably be on there. Yeah, I just really love the story in that and how they were able to give these animals such personality and characters without, talking or singing or dancing or any of that other stuff. Yeah.
And they did the whole thing on open sourced software, which just blows my mind.
Hmm. Yeah, and real animal noises,
Yeah.
except for the capybara, which I read was like a camel, I think.
Still achieved. All right,
Yeah.
we're ready to hear your pick for top film of the year.
Yeah, so movie of the year for me kind of came as a surprise, but I think from the moment that I saw it, I knew that it would likely be pretty high up there, if not number one. And it's called All We Imagine Is Light, another movie that has yet to come to Indy for some reason. But it's an Indian film from a director named Payal Kapadia. I knew nothing about this movie before I saw it at the Heartland Film Festival. I did not watch any trailers. I didn't know anything about Payal Kapadia or any of the actors. I just remembered that it got good reviews out of Cannes this summer, and that was all I needed. But yeah, it's just a really fantastic story about women in Mumbai, and they're just trying to get by, trying to find love. But it's about so much more than that, and it's kind of one of those films that you really just have to experience. I think the way that these characters were written and performed was just one of the most real to me that I saw all of last year. Felt like they really existed in real life and like they just kind of existed outside of the confines of the movie. And it's kind of a non-traditional story. There's no end point that they're trying to get to. There's no big obstacles or antagonists that they're trying to overcome. It's just a very real set of circumstances that they find themselves in.
Yeah, it's one of those movies where it's so organic that it just feels like these lives are going on, and we just sort of enter to sit with them and walk beside them for a little bit. and then we leave, but their life and adventures are going to continue after we're
Hmm.
there. And one of those stories where I say where you don't really feel like you're observing them, you really feel like you're sitting beside them, and
Hmm.
that's a rare quality in film. All right, well,
Yeah, and kind of like with The Brutalist, it's kind of a film of two halves as well. It's they go outside of Mumbai in the second half, and it kind of becomes something else. A different vibe, and then, but yeah, I found the second half very, very interesting and fascinating.
cool. Well, no surprises for those who read my stuff that Amelia Perez is my favorite film of the year. Honestly, I felt kind of alone with the film for a couple of months because it seemed like I was one of the few that really had a lot of passion for it. But it's kind of now gaining a little steam in the awards. It actually won Best Drama at the Golden Globes as well as Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress. So who knows? Maybe it's prospects for. We got the Critics' Choice Awards coming up this Sunday, which I'm also a voting member of. I think it's going to perhaps do well there and get a little steam going in the Oscars. Just a wonderful story, an unexpected story. It's. I'll contrast this with I saw the TV Glow was. It's definitely a off-kilter, different, weird, whatever you want to call it movie. But I didn't feel like it was chasing that. I felt like this it sat with itself and its story of a drug kingpin who goes through a transformation and then kind of reemerges back into the world in a different way. But can they actually escape their dark past? I see we've just got a minute or so left here. So Ben, if you just want to like kind of wrap up the year in movie, like where does 2024 rank for you? And amongst was it a great year? Was it a terrible year in movies?
I don't think I would say it's either one. I think people that say that it was a terrible year probably only saw a couple of movies last year. I had no problem making up my top 10. Maybe there weren't as many, five-star movies as 2023, but,
Sometimes it's like
it's,
that. Yeah, I would say the same thing. It was I saw a lot of very good movies this year, a lot of very good movies. But I didn't see any truly great ones that I think, oh, this is going to stand the test of time in 35 years, 40 years from now. We're still going to be talking about them. But that's okay. I mean, sometimes, in some years we've had one or two truly outstanding films, and then the drop off is hard after that. So I would call it, a decent year in film. Certainly not the best, certainly not the worst.
yeah, like I said, I had no problem making up my top 10. In fact, there were several late cuts. I think, there were only
Some of those,
two
some
movies.
you're almost the best of the rest, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Yeah, we can list a couple honorable mentions. Yeah, some of them we already talked about. A Complete Unknown, The Brutalist, Civil War, Conclave, Flow. Um, let's see. Dee Dee was a good one for me. The one from Sean Wong. Girls State, the documentary on Apple TV Plus, I was a big fan of. The Mike Lee film Hard Truths. I'm very much a Mike Lee neophyte, so I went into that one not really knowing what to expect. And yeah, just great performance from Marianne John Baptiste and everyone else, and a really great screenplay. Uh, Another documentary called Hayao Miyazaki and the Heron. It's very on brand of me to love anything about Miyazaki. So check that one out. It's about the making of The Boy and the Heron from last year. So it's available on HBO Max. Hitman, Richard Linklater's Hitman, I was a fan of. The documentary No Other Land, A Real Pain, the Almodovar film or The Room Next Door. The Seed of the Sacred Fig was a big late cut for me. I was very impressed with that. And then the big IFJA winner, The Substance. A lot of fun, but just not good enough, I think, for my list.
Yeah, I've got a little bit longer list, but I'll mention some of my also rans best of the rest. Babes, Ileana Glazer's very smart, funny and raunchy look at motherhood and friendship. Back to Black, an Amy Winehouse biopic that no one seemed to see or appreciate. Better Man, which I think is hitting local theaters actually this Friday. Knew nothing about Robbie Williams, but now, even though we saw him as a chimpanzee, I feel like I know him. We mentioned his three daughters, the Kevin Costner Horizon and American Saga, very in some ways very old and in some ways very different sort of Western. Hundreds of Beavers, very off kilter film, hard to even describe other than 10 minutes in, I was like, is this the whole movie like this? And by the end, I kind of loved it. Janet Planet, very, very tiny film debut by writer director Annie Baker, looking at a mother daughter relationship. Long Legs. I mentioned horror films that generally scared me. That was one of the few. We mentioned Look Back, Love Lies Bleeding, another kind of very dark and different story with local actress Katie O'Brien making a big impression. Memoir of a Snail, another animated film I really liked. The documentary My Name is Alfred Hitchcock is just sort of an examination of the style. Just I learned so much. The Piano Lesson, terrific look at racism through a historical lens. Real Pain, documentary called The Remarkable Life of Ibelin that looks at the gaming community that generally tends to get ignored or degraded. Saturday Night, Reitman's look at the first night of Saturday Night Live. You mentioned The Seed of the Sacred Fig. September 5th, which is a very much an ensemble existential look at the 1972 Olympics hostage crisis. The Speedway Murders look at actually some local famous crime here in Indianapolis that took a very different sort of cant in how it approached the material. And then White Bird, which was a terrific film, a World War II film about the Holocaust. And I don't know why it got lost and ignored. It's got a named director, Mark Forrester, a named star, Helen Mirren. And it's one of those ones that people just absolutely missed, and boy, they missed something.
Yeah, I'm one of those. I until you mentioned it, I had literally never heard of that movie, and I feel like I've heard of every movie that came out last year. So,
Yeah, it just happens
gonna,
sometimes. Gosh, it, one of the greatest joys and I think most best roles of the critic is to champion small films that people haven't heard them and help it along and help them find an audience. And it's always such a joy too. Like I remember when the first Paddington, um, it got dropped into theaters with no fanfare, no publicity, nothing. And I was like, I'd one of the few people that had reviews of it up. I was just like, guys, this is an amazing, amazing movie. And then people found it, and then eventually made a sequel, which is good, but not as good as the first one, despite what people want to say. And now they're making a third one coming out here in just a bit. So yeah, always fun to do that.
yeah, I mean to backtrack a little bit on you mentioned Hundreds of Beavers. You know, I saw that movie in 2023 at the Indie Film Fest, which was I think in April that year. And, it kind of came and went from Indie Film Fest. You know, it's a great festival, but it's very kind of small and not a whole lot of eyes get put on it, unfortunately. And saw it then and just would not have anticipated the kind of reception that it's gotten this past year. It's kind of crazy to see it happen.
Yeah. And I don't do a worst of list because as I say, I think making a crappy movie is its own punishment, so I don't care to pile on. If you can go to the Film app, you can go check out. I do have my list of, as I call it, the disappointments, movies that I had hopes for that in some ways disappointed me. So go check that out. And Ben, tell everybody again where they can go check out your top 10 list.
Yeah, it's on themoviestate.com where I'll
Oh,
have more movie and TV reviews coming this year.
cool beans. All right, well, Ben, it's always a pleasure to join you. And we will hopefully be doing this again maybe next year, looking at our top 10 of 2025.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks again.
All right, thanks for coming.